Well, hi everybody, I'm Bill Whittle. Welcome to the Firewall. Now, I'm about to say something that will shock a lot of modern listeners, but 50 years ago, very few people would be shocked in the slightest, and 100 years ago, just about every American would be nodding in complete agreement and wondering what all the fuss was about. Ready? If the House of Representatives passed a bill by a vote of 435 to nothing, and then the Senate took up that bill and passed it by a vote of 100 to nothing, and that bill went right to the president's desk and was signed into law, but that law said that the First Amendment was overturned, well, even though it was lawfully, indeed, it was unanimously done, that law would still be illegitimate, period. And conservatives, especially Tea Party conservatives, would be out in the streets with our rifles to make sure that this procedurally correct, unanimously voted on law did not take effect. And yes, we're proud of this. So how do we square this respect for some laws with contempt for others? Well, we do it because there are, in reality, two antithetical ideas of what law is. Now, on one hand is what author Richard Maybury called political law. That'd be laws made by kings or shahs or congressmen, laws made by people. On the other hand, we conservatives, and many old school liberals, of course, believe in something called natural law. Political law is simply the law as written by individuals. It varies with the whims of the individuals that wrote it. It is arbitrary. It is constantly changing, and it is therefore unpredictable. People with political power write political law. But natural law is very different. Natural law is not written. It is revealed. Now, by that I mean that natural law is inherent in nature and individuals, and revealing natural law simply means writing down in words what already exists. Now, the United States of America is the first, and as far as I know, the only country in the history of the world to be founded on natural law. The Declaration of Independence was an appeal to the world, an appeal to overthrow the corrupt political law of King George and invoke a higher law, natural law, as justification for this action. Probably the most definitive sentence ever written on natural law, certainly the most famous sentence, is this one. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What a sentence. You know, everything you need to know about the exceptionalism of America is right there in that one profoundly simple sentence. First, we hold these truths, not these opinions, not these agreements, not this consensus, not this vote, these truths, fundamental realities that any person in any culture can reason out for himself. To be self-evident, that means we didn't write them, we didn't create them, we don't allow them or grant them permission. They are self-evident because they were here before we were. That all men are created equal. Obviously not equally rich or equally smart or equally tall or equally fast, but equal under the law, which applies to the rich and powerful as well as to the poor and friendless. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Now, for people who believe in God, this is self-explanatory, but even people who do not believe in God need to believe in this, that each human has, as his birthright, certain rights that cannot be taken away, and that these rights are bestowed upon us not by people, not by governments, but by a force far greater than people or government. You could call it history, call it human evolution, call it justice, but whatever it is beyond the reach of mortal men and women. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, notice that these rights are not commodities like widescreen TVs or even food or rent or health care, because if you had a legal right to these commodities, someone would be legally bound to provide them for you, whether they wanted to or not. And once any commodity becomes a right, then where do you stop? Once you have a right to a commodity, why don't you have a right to all commodities? Notice also how the Bill of Rights takes a natural law approach to our liberties. It doesn't grant us freedoms, it protects freedoms that are given to us at birth. Listen to the language of the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law prohibiting. Congress, political law, may not abridge or infringe. Wording like this simply means that politicians may not prohibit or abridge or infringe upon pre-existing rights. The Bill of Rights does not grant these rights because no human instrument, not even the Constitution, has the power to grant those rights. They pre-exist. They are inherent. They are, in fact, unalienable. You see, if people do not have any unalienable rights, then they have no protection at all from any political law. The king or the sultan or the czar or even the majority in a freely elected Congress determine what laws people will have to live under, which they may employ by force and without any consent. It's all arbitrary, and since it doesn't come from a higher authority, it can be modified at any time. And frankly, if people really can't be trusted with liberty and self-government, then probably the more laws the better. But if we are, in fact, born free, then the question isn't how many laws we need, but how few. What is the fewest number of laws that free people need? Well, it turns out they just need 2. I mentioned Richard Maybury earlier. Well, he wrote a remarkable book called Whatever Happened to Justice? It's all about natural law, and he boiled these 2 laws down to the most succinct form that I have ever heard. First, do all that you agreed to do. Second, do not encroach upon other persons or their property. Now, do all that you agreed to do is the basis for contract law. Do not encroach on other persons or their property is the basis for all criminal law or tort law, in other words, private lawsuits. Thomas Jefferson said that rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will, with limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. Unobstructed action according to our will means you can do whatever you darn well want to. You are a free person, but your freedom of action ends when other people or their property are harmed by your actions. It's just that simple. That's all you really need. Now, political law is not always bad, of course, but political law that is based on natural law is almost always good, and political law that runs in the face of natural law is almost always bad. For example, contract law, do all you agree to do, has a history that goes back through human cultures for thousands of years. There have been contracts for as long as there's been language. However, during the financial panic of 2008, the government nationalized entire companies and sometimes entire industries. In doing so, they simply went in and voided the contractual obligations that those companies had with their investors. The political law violated the natural law, and there are consequences to that kind of tyranny. At this very moment, in the middle of a dead shark economy and high unemployment, it might surprise you to know that private enterprise is sitting on more cash reserves than they have had on hand at any time during the last 50 years. Corporations and small businesses are sitting on tons of cash, but they're not spending it on creating new jobs. You know why? Because they're smart, that's why. Because since this administration simply went in and voided contracts in the past, there's no reason to believe, none whatsoever, that they won't do it again in the future. Natural law, you see, is fair. It is ancient, and it is therefore predictable. Businessmen can plan on laws based on natural law. They can make calculated risks to invest more in stock, hire more employees, open another factory, and all the rest. But when these politicians simply decide to vote away contracts because they have the power to do so, when they employ corrupt political law, then businesses have no choice but to sit and wait and save and prepare for the worst. Folks, this recession is not the result of a bad economy. It's the result of bad law. And the bad laws keep on coming. You know, up until very recently, the history of America was the slow and painful process of using the logic and clarity of the common law process to widen the arms of natural law to include all of those who are entitled to its protections, all men and all women, regardless of their race or economic status or religious beliefs or any of the rest. Now, liberty has not always been colorblind or gender neutral in America, but it is now. What a tragedy that now, at the moment of its widest embrace, the wisdom and protections of natural law are falling to the onslaught of those who make whatever laws they want under whatever pretext, beholden to no one. We have to stop that. That's why we have a Tea Party.
As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that gold sparkling sands of a diamond desert.
And all around me a voice was sounding, whoa, this land was made for you and